June 22nd, 1941, 3:15 a.m. at the Bug River near Brest-Litovsk. In Eastern Europe, the pre-dawn hours of summer are often cool and heavy with moisture. A wispy fog clings to the river's surface, blanketing the flat meadows dotted with sparse birch groves. The ground is firm and dry, offering excellent traction. On the western bank, German divisions are holding their breath, concealed within the dense underbrush. The Maybach engines of Panzer III and IV tanks purr quietly in the darkness, like powerful animals restrained on a tight leash. Absolute silence reigns. No one dares to cough or strike a match. Along a vast front stretching over 2,900 kilometers, every soldier awaits the same precise moment. Inside a forward command dugout, a lieutenant colonel spreads a map across stacked ammunition crates. 3 bold, black arrows point eastward, indicating the major axes of advance. North toward Leningrad, center towards Moscow, and south into Ukraine and the Caucasus. He taps the map with a pencil, reciting figures. Over 3 million men, roughly 3,500 tanks, nearly 2,700 aircraft, and approximately 600,000 vehicles, according to some sources. These numbers represent a colossal mass of metal poised to unleash its fury. Yet, these forces didn't materialize spontaneously. They are the product of deliberate planning and calculated intentions. Why did Germany attack the Soviet Union? There isn't a single, simple explanation. It's a complex situation, a rope woven from many strands, pulled taut long before this fateful morning. The first strand is ideology. Hitler portrayed the USSR as Bolshevik land, denigrating Slavs as an inferior race and envisioning the East as living space to be conquered. In private speeches, he called for a war of annihilation, not a conventional military campaign. This toxic ideology permeated the ranks, shaping the mindset of German soldiers through briefings and whispered rumors. A corporal in the 45th Division, carrying a small notebook and a photo of his daughter in his tunic, wrote the night before, "Tomorrow, we step into history. They say this war cleans a world." His hand trembled, not from fear, but from a deep-seated understanding that nothing would ever be the same after this day. The second strand is economic and logistical. With Britain remaining defiant and the German Navy unable to control the Atlantic, Hitler desperately needed resources: oil, grain, iron, ore. He cast his gaze towards the resource-rich lands of Ukraine, the Donbass, and the Caucasus. In the spring of 1941, German planners warned that without access to Eastern oil, the war machine would sputter and die, starved of fuel, as some sources indicate. Operation Barbarossa was not merely a military offensive. It was a brutal grab for vital food and energy supplies. The third strand is strategy, flawed but dangerously intoxicating. Emboldened by the swift defeat of France in just 6 weeks, Hitler convinced himself that the USSR would crumble within months. He believed the Red Army had been decapitated by Stalin's purges, and that the Soviet leader would react sluggishly. The 1939 Non-Aggression Pact lulled Stalin into a false sense of security, reinforcing his belief that he had time. Germany was gambling on achieving a swift and decisive shock. It's the kind of reckless gamble winners make when they're drunk on success, a gamble that losers don't comprehend until they're already bleeding. German artillery pieces are rolled up to the edge of the tree line. Infantry soldiers lie prone, clutching their Kar 98K rifles. Behind them, batteries of horse-drawn 105mm Luft H-18 howitzers stand clustered together. These guns, with caliber 105mm, have a maximum range of around 12 kilometers and a rate of fire of 4 to 6 rounds per minute. Further back, heavy 150mm SFH-18 artillery pieces are positioned, their range extending to nearly 13 kilometers, each blast sending shock waves through the ground like a punch to the chest. 88mm guns are carefully aimed for direct fire, ready to engage any Soviet armor that might appear. On nearby dispersal strips, Ju-87 Stuka dive bombers await, armed with 250 to 500 kilograms bombs and equipped with Jericho sirens bolted under the landing gear, designed to instill terror in the enemy. A company commander walks along the line, speaking in a low voice. No firing before the order. When the guns open up, we cross. Speed. No halts. The words, delivered with cold precision, cut through the tension like sharp blades. The men nod, their faces grim. They are unaware that on the opposite bank, thousands of Soviet troops are asleep in trenches, roughly 5 to 2 meters deep, roofed with rough-hewn timber. They also don't know that Soviet communication lines are being intercepted, and many units remain unaware of the impending attack because Moscow has ordered no provocations. The artillery signal is given. A long, drawn-out whistle pierces the fog-laden air. Then the world explodes. Along the entire front, German artillery opens fire. The impacts merge into a continuous, devastating curtain of destruction. At key breakthrough points, the density of fire reaches hundreds of shells per minute, according to some sources, turning the horizon a fiery red. Shells obliterate depots, communication switchboards, and gun emplacements. At the Brest fortress, the thick brick walls tremble as if in an earthquake. Soviet soldiers awaken amidst the smoke and chaos, still without their boots. A junior officer bursts into the courtyard shouting, "Combat alarm! To positions!" His voice is drowned out by the deafening explosions. The Bug River erupts in towering white geysers as shrapnel tears through the water. German pontoons are launched. Engineers sprint forward, their shoulders laden with beams and their hands hauling wire. Soviet machine guns respond. DP-27 spitting out about 550 rounds per minute, tracers streaking across the water. An engineer is hit and collapses on the bank, his blood staining the mist-shrouded ground. The next man leaps over him without hesitation. The war demands a heavy toll at the very outset. Panzer IIIs lumber onto bridges. The weight of their tracks causes the wooden planks to crack. These tanks, capable of reaching speeds of around 40 kilometers per hour on hard roads, possess 50mm guns effective against armor at ranges of 500 to 1,000 meters. Panzer IVs, armed with short 75mm guns, provide high explosive support, tearing apart bunkers. Coaxial MG-34 and MG-42 machine guns scream. The MG-42, with its cyclic rate reaching about 1,200 rounds per minute, produces a distinctive tearing cloth sound that will become a chilling signature of the Eastern Front. Stukas begin their dives, plummeting almost vertically from the sky, releasing bombs onto bridges and dugouts. The Jericho sirens wail like the agonizing shriek of a broken neck. A Soviet squad dashes across an open yard. A bomb strikes. 3 men vanish in the explosion. The last man lies face down, dirt filling his ears. He instinctively reaches for his pocket. His wife's photo is still there. He grits his teeth, rises to his feet, shoulders his long Mosin-Nagant rifle, and fires a single shot as shadow crossing the ditch. In Soviet headquarters, phones ring incessantly. Reports flood in. Enemy crossed the border. Airfields bombed. Lines cut. But many commanders hesitate, paralyzed by disbelief. Some ask, "Are you sure? Could this be a local provocation?" In the age of mechanized warfare, a few hours of doubt can be a lifetime. At Grodno, Minsk, and Lvov, German armor columns are already tearing open the Soviet defenses. They do not stop at the border. Their plan calls for deep thrusts and encirclements. Soviet frontline armies are being trapped. They launch scattered counterattacks with outdated T-20SXS and BT-7s, many lacking radios, relying on flags for communication. In the thick smoke, the flags become useless. Tanks drift off course, and German 37mm anti-tank guns, the door knockers, annihilate them at close range. A T-26 burns, its crew desperately crawling out engulfed in flames. From the very first morning, Germany's hopes for a quick victory hinge on 2 crucial factors: speed and the paralysis of Soviet command. This is why the assault begins at dawn and targets airfields first. The Luftwaffe craters runways and destroys hundreds of Soviet aircraft on the ground on the first day, although exact totals vary by source. Germany wants to prevent the enemy from even lifting its head. Yet, beneath the arrows and numbers, individual human beings remain vulnerable. A young German soldier steps over a Soviet trench, barely chest deep. He notices a crumpled, unmailed letter. The Russian handwriting reads, "Mother, I'm still fine." I'll come home after the harvest. He cannot read the words, but he understands its message of farewell. He pauses for a second, then a shout snaps him back to reality. Keep moving. No stopping. This is just the initial surge. Germany believes it is unlocking a decisive chapter in history. The Soviet Union has barely opened its eyes. In the fog along the Bug River, every driving force, ideology, oil, miscalculation, has been transformed into a torrent of shellfire and the relentless grinding of steel tracks. And those tracks are relentlessly rolling east. June 27th, 1941, 9:12 a.m., west of Minsk, near the Berezina River. The air is already sweltering. Dust hangs thick over the wheat fields. The road is a pale ribbon slicing through pine forests and swamps. German armor is advancing eastward in two massive pincers. The tracks bite into the dry ground, engines roaring. The spearheads have penetrated more than 300 kilometers into Soviet territory. The first week is not yet over, but the map is already collapsing. A panzer commander stands partially out of his turret, headphones crackling. Close the ring. No gaps. He points to a line of smoke on the horizon, marking the location of Soviet fuel depots. The order is simple. Bypass resistance, drive deep, and let the infantry mop up behind. Blitzkrieg is not just a word here. It's an ingrained reflex. Soviet troops ahead are not retreating in orderly formations. They are breaking into isolated pockets, fighting fiercely from within. At Białystok and Minsk, entire armies are being encircled. The German pincers link up on June 27th, although the exact date varies slightly depending on the source. Trapped within the encirclement, hundreds of thousands of Red Army soldiers are cut off. They have rifles, a few guns, and almost no fuel. Their radio communications collapse under relentless bombing. Commanders shout into dead phones, issuing futile orders. In the woods, a Soviet major lays a map on a tree stump. He traces a thin route eastward with a pencil stub. We break out tonight. Silent. Bayonets only until we reach the line. The men listen, their faces gaunt with dust and hunger. One pulls a folded letter from his breast pocket. It is damp and stained. He reads it by sunlight filtering through the leaves. Come home soon. The rye is tall this year. He presses it back against his heart and checks his Mosin nagant. 5 rounds in the clip. That is all he has for the night. At noon, the breakout attempt slams into German blocking troops. MG-42s open fire, their cyclic rate reaching around 1,200 rounds per minute. The sound is not of individual shots, but of fabric tearing apart. Tracers rip through the fir branches. Men fall without a sound. Soviet DP-27s respond with shorter, heavier bursts, about 550 rounds per minute. A 76, 2mm divisional gun fires directly at the muzzle flash. Its shell splinters a tree, showering the area with fragments, but the German line holds. Air power intensifies the chaos. Overhead, Ju-87 Stuka circle, diving in pairs, their sirens screaming. A 250 kilograms bomb hits a road junction, creating a crater wider than a truck. Horse carts are overturned, ammunition explodes. The German forward observer counts the impacts and calls in another strike. Each sortie lasts only minutes, but the ground feels like it is being relentlessly hammered. The Luftwaffe is not alone. Soviet pilots rise from shattered airfields, often without orders. I-16s and MiG-3s climb into sun. Their cannons are small, 20mm SHVAK, with a rate of fire around 700 to 800 rounds per minute, but they are brave enough to ram enemy aircraft when they run out of ammunition. A Soviet fighter clips the tail of a He-111, both spiraling down into a field. The German crew bails out at low altitude. One parachute fails to open. On the ground, Soviet counterattacks come in uncoordinated waves. Near Dubno Brody in early July, the Red Army throws hundreds of tanks forward, T-20X SBT-7s, and a surprisingly small number of new T-34s and KV-1s. The fighting is close, brutal, and deafening. A KV, one rolls into a village street. Its 76mm gun fires at point-blank range. German 37mm anti-tank rounds bounce harmlessly off its armor. Crews curse in frustration. They drag 88mm guns into position. The 88 fires a high-velocity shell at roughly 800 to 900 meters per second. At 800 meters, it punches through the KV side. The Soviet tank stops as if its heart has been pierced. A German infantry squad advances behind tanks, soaked in sweat. The ground is littered with spent cartridges. A corporal sees a Soviet trench line, shallow, about 5 meters deep, zigzagging to the loam. He throws a stick grenade. It lands with a dull thud. He jumps in after it. There's a boy inside, maybe 17. The boy's hands are raised in surrender. He is crying silently. The corporal hesitates. A sergeant shouts, "Move!" Prisoners later. The corporal pulls the boy out by the collar and shoves him rearward. The boy clutches a photo in his fist, the paper edge cutting into his palm. He does not let go. Behind the German spearheads, the infantry marches through burning villages. Orders from above are brutal. Commissars are to be shot. Jews are to be separated. Partisans are to be hanged. Not every soldier agrees with these orders, but the machine of policy grinds on, fueled by obedience. A private writes in his diary at night, "We are told this is not a war like France. The faces in the ditches prove it." He closes the book quickly as an officer passes. Soviet civilians move in the opposite direction, carrying everything they own on their backs. A woman pulls 2 children and a goat cart along a track. She hears artillery again. She does not know whose artillery it is. She only knows that the distance is shrinking. A whistle blows from a Soviet rear guard unit. "Clear the road. Military traffic." She steps into a ditch. A column of trucks roars past, dust blinding. In the last truck, a soldier leans out and tosses her a crust of bread. She catches it like a precious stone. By July 10th, German army group center reaches the Dwina and Dnieper lines and turns toward Smolensk. The road narrows into choke points over rivers. Bridges are blown. Engineers rebuild them under fire. A German pioneer squad lays a pontoon bridge, while Soviet artillery finds its range. Soviet 122mm howitzers, with a range of about 11 to 12 kilometers, lob shells that walk closer with each burst. One lands 30 meters short, the next on the far bank. The third hits the pontoon bridge. Men are flung into the river. The survivors drag the wreckage back and begin again. Speed remains a guiding principle, but now every kilometer forward is bought with blood. Smolensk becomes a new inferno. July 15th, 1941, 6:50 a.m., outskirts of Yartsevo. The sky is low and white with rain haze. Mud begins to form in the wheel tracks. Soviet forces counterattack from the north and south, attempting to cut off the German spearheads. The streets fill with smoke and brick dust. German infantry engages in house-to-house fighting. A Soviet machine gun nest in a cellar covers a crossroads. Germans bring up an 81mm mortar. The tube thumps at a rate of about 18 to 20 rounds per minute. Bombs drop into the cellar mouth. The gun falls silent. The Smolensk pocket closes, then cracks open, then closes again. Thousands of Soviets break out in small groups. Many are shot down. Some slip through under the cover of night. German casualty lists grow longer. Soviet losses are staggering. By late July, Red Army losses in the first month are in the millions. Killed, captured, and missing, although exact proportions vary depending on the source. German losses are far smaller, but not insignificant. Divisions that entered Operation Barbarossa, expecting a short campaign, are already down 20 to 30% in rifle strength, according to some sources. The chaos is consuming both sides, albeit at different rates. In a birch grove, a German medic kneels beside a wounded Soviet soldier. The man's leg is gone below the knee. Blood soaks the grass. The medic applies a tourniquet. The Soviet soldier grabs a sleeve and whispers a name. The medic does not understand the language, but he hears the desperation in the man's voice. He gives him water. Then a German officer yells, "Medic, move up! Our men first." The medic stands. He glances back once. The Soviet soldier is still moving his lips, trying to finish the name. That is the essence of this phase. Not a clean sweep, but a grinding collision of masses. German columns surge forward. Soviet lines shatter, then reform behind rivers and towns. Every Soviet retreat creates another pocket, and another desperate breakout fight. Every German kilometer forward stretches supply lines thinner. Trucks burn fuel faster than it can be delivered. Horses die on hot roads. Ammunition dumps are now a day behind the leading tanks. At night, on a captured hill, a German captain studies his map by flashlight. The arrows still point east, but he hears the rumble of Soviet trains deeper in the darkness. New divisions are arriving. The Soviet state is not dead. It is bleeding, but it is learning to move while bleeding. The second crescendo ends without resolution. It ends with a truth that both sides can sense, but neither can yet acknowledge openly. The war has not been decided in a month. It has only begun to reveal its true depth. The road to Moscow is open, but it is no longer empty. And behind every German advance, there is a growing shadow of distance, weather, and a Soviet army that refuses to vanish. December 5th, 1941, 5:30 a.m. The Western approaches to Moscow near Klin. The temperature is hovering around minus 20 degrees Celsius. Snow has fallen all night in a fine, dry sheet. The landscape is a stark contrast of black pine trees against a white ground. The roads are rutted with ice. Lubricants thicken. Metal sears exposed skin. German sentries stamp their feet, listening to a silence that feels ominously vast. Out in that silence, the Red Army is on the move. For months, the German arrows have relentlessly pushed eastward. Kiev has fallen. Smolensk lies in ruins. Vyazma and Bryansk have become the sites of new encirclements. By October, Army Group Center launched Operation Typhoon, lunging towards Moscow. Panzer spearheads attempted to replicate the successes of June, deep thrusts and rapid encirclements. Initially, they cut highways like scissors, but the terrain began to change the equation. The autumn Rasputitsa turned fields into impassable swamps. Tanks sank up to their belly plates. Trucks crawled along at 5 to 10 kilometers per hour, wheels spinning uselessly. Horse teams collapsed in the mud, their legs broken. Fuel consumption soared as deliveries slowed. Supply columns stretched 300 to 500 kilometers behind the lead units, according to some sources. The blitzkrieg rhythm faltered. Still, the Germans reached the outskirts of Moscow. On November 30th, forward patrols glimpsed Moscow's suburbs through the swirling snow. A staff officer wrote in pencil, "We can smell the city." He omitted the fact that his men were freezing. The casualty figures told a different story. Divisions that entered Operation Typhoon at full strength were now reduced to half, sometimes even less, in combat effectiveness, according to some sources. Frostbite casualties climbed into the tens of thousands. Rifles malfunctioned. MG-34s seized up unless kept warm under coats. Panzer engines needed hours of preheating before they could be started. The Soviet side bent, but it did not break. Stalin remained in the city. Factories were evacuated east, beyond the Urals, in a steady flow of rail cars. Fresh divisions arrived from Siberia, released because Soviet intelligence believed Japan would not strike in the Far East. These units stepped off the trains in padded winter gear, skis slung over their shoulders. Their breath plumed out in white clouds. They had T-34 tanks whose wide tracks provided better traction on the snow and mud. Their 76mm guns could destroy Panzer III and IV tanks at typical combat ranges of 500 to 1,000 m. They brought with them fresh artillery, two 122mm and 152mm howitzers, rockets, and ammunition that had not been dragged across half a continent. At 6 o'clock on December 5th, Soviet artillery opened fire. The sound was deeper and more resonant than the summer fire. Batteries that had been hidden for weeks now unleashed coordinated waves of fire. A 76mm field gun could fire 10 to 15 rounds per minute in short bursts. Heavier units fired slower, but the sheer volume of fire was overwhelming. Across various sectors, barrage density reached dozens of shells per minute per kilometer, according to some sources. Snow erupted in black fountains. German foxholes, about 8 meters deep roofed with frozen logs, shook and shed chunks of ice. Men huddled inside, their hands over their helmets. Then the infantry came, skis whispering across the snow. Near Klin, a Soviet platoon advanced through a birch stand. Their commander raised a whistle and gave a short blast. Forward, don't bunch up. The men moved in short rushes, rifles tucked close to prevent the bolts from freezing. A soldier named Mikhail carried a photograph of his wife in a small metal case. He touched it once before stepping out of cover, a swift gesture, not wanting anyone to see his trembling hands. They encountered a German outpost line. The Germans fired first. MG-42s chattered even in the extreme cold. Their rate of fire still near 1,200 rounds per minute, but the gunners had to swap barrels with bare hands wrapped in rags. Soviet men fell. Others slid behind snow hummocks and fired back. PPSH 41 submachine guns spat 7. 62 millimeters rounds at a rate of about 900 rounds per minute, a loud and sharp barrage, ideal for close quarters fighting in the trees and trenches. A German corporal screamed orders, his breath fogging his vision. He realized he could no longer feel his feet. The Soviet assault kept coming, not a single thrust, but a relentless rolling shove. German commanders tried to counter with local reserves, but reserves were thin. Many tanks were immobilized by the cold or lack of fuel. Anti-tank guns still inflicted casualties when they found targets. 50 mm Pak 38s had a decent chance against T-34s from the flank at close range. 88 mm guns remained deadly, but there were not enough of them, and they were not positioned where the line was breaking. On December 7th, a German battalion in a village west of Istra received the order to withdraw. The battalion commander read it twice. The word withdraw had been almost absent since June. He folded the paper and put it in his breast pocket like a forbidden secret. He blew a whistle. Back to the next line. Take the wounded. Burn what you can't carry. The men obeyed without argument, but their eyes betrayed their inner turmoil. They had been told for 6 months that retreat was failure. Now, retreat was survival. Along the road, Soviet cavalry in white cloaks pushed through the snowdrifts, sabers lowered. Tanks followed behind, their engines muffled by the snow. The Germans fell back 100 to 250 kilometers from Moscow over the next weeks, depending on the sector. Villages that had been taken at a huge cost were abandoned in hours. The front did not collapse into a complete rout, but it sagged and recoiled like a stretched tendon snapping back. Brief human moments slipped between the blows. A German medic found a dead comrade in a ditch, his face covered in frost. He pulled out the man's wallet, saw a photograph of 2 children with a dog, its edges curled from sweat. He slipped it into his own pocket, intending to send it home later with a note. In a Soviet trench outside Volokholamsk, a young woman serving as a signaler wrote a letter during a lull. We held. The city is still ours. She sealed it with numb fingers. The runner who took it disappeared into the snow. By January 1942, the meaning of Barbarossa was vastly different from what Berlin had promised. Germany had inflicted catastrophic losses on the Soviet Union. Millions captured or killed in 1941 alone, although exact numbers vary depending on the source. But the Soviet state had not been destroyed. It had relocated its industry, expanded its armies, and learned to wage a modern, resilient defense. Germany, meanwhile, had burned through irreplaceable vehicles, horses, and seasoned infantry. The war of annihilation it had chosen was turning into a war of endurance. It could not win quickly. Strategically, the map solidified into a new configuration. The front line now stretched from Leningrad siege arc down to the outskirts of Rostov. The Soviet Union held Moscow, its crucial rail hub and political heart. Germany was forced into a 2-front war, still battling Britain, and now locked in the largest land war in history. Italian, Romanian, and Hungarian allies were being dragged deeper into the conflict. Resources that were intended to be seized became resources consumed. The Eastern Campaign became the Reich's primary drain. The legacy extended beyond mere borders, shaping doctrine and technology. Barbarossa proved that blitzkrieg without logistics was a blade without a handle. It forced both sides into industrial war, mass tank production, deeper operational art, combined arms at a continental scale. The Soviets refined deep battle, using layered defenses and carefully timed counteroffensives. The Germans doubled down on operational maneuver, but increasingly relied on heavier armor and anti-tank weapons to survive the waves they could no longer outpace. Winter warfare became a science encompassing specialized clothing, engine heaters, ski troops, and strategically located supply nodes. Radio coordination and reconnaissance evolved from luxuries into necessities, and memory persisted in small, personal objects. A Soviet veteran kept a metal photo case long after the war, dead by shrapnel but still snapping shut. A German survivor remembered the first morning on the Bug and the last night outside Moscow as two ends of the same hallway, one bright with overconfidence, the other dark with the chill of impending defeat. Barbarossa began as an ideological crusade and a resource grab. It ended in 1941 as a stalled engine in the snow, the first clear signal that the war in the East would be decided not by a single summer of speed, but by years of blood factories and endurance.